続きまして、セッション2、VACS とは、アフリカにおける強靭な食料システム実現のための適応作物と健全な土壌のビジョンに移ります。最初の講演は、東京大学未来ビジョン研究センター教授、アレキサンドロス・ガスパラトス先生です。ガスパラトス先生、よろしくお願いいたします。
Good afternoon, everybody. I feel a little bit scared to follow up after such a very inspiring presentation, but I will do my best. Right now, I'm going to take you to a different part of the world, Africa, to see how a lot of these issues about diversity play out on the field. And I'm going to be presenting the results of a project that we have been working for several years with also some partners from JIRCAS. So, Dr. Fowler mentioned a lot of the problems facing Africa when it comes to African food systems. We know there is high levels of malnutrition and food insecurity. There is a high reliance on imported and unhealthy food items. There is high economic significance, but also on the performance of the agricultural sector. There is increased vulnerability to climate change. But of course, something that is not very much discussed always, it's the reliance on just a few crops that might not be strongly adapted to the changing climate. Okay, so what can we do in this kind of interface of climate change, food insecurity, low agricultural diversity? One of the possible response options, I do not say it is the only response option, but one of the possible response options is to leverage the promise of plant genetic diversity through the increased adoption, utilization, and commercialization of neglected and underutilized plant species that can be found throughout the continent. There are a lot of definitions of neglected and underutilized species, but what is important to understand it is the term neglected usually underlines the low level of research investment made on the species. The term underutilized alludes to their untapped livelihood potentials. And when we talk about NUS, it might be domesticated plants, under domesticated or wild. So there are a lot of different possible options when we're talking about these plant species. And again, it is not a universally accepted definition, but this is a type of definition that we have been working in our project. And when I talk about our project, we designed this research after we identified a lot of the research gaps. We do not know very well conceptually the links between neglected and underutilized plant species and resilience to climate change. We know that maybe their adoption might increase resilience to climate change, but what are the mechanisms underlying this process? We do not know very well the current and future distribution of many of these promising plant species. We do not know very well the factors affecting the adoption and mechanisms underpinning the socioeconomic impacts of the species. And of course, we do not know the appropriate approaches, context-specific approaches to upscale the promotion and adoption of NUS. I will talk a little bit more about the one highlighted in yellow. This is what would work from the Japanese side. This project brought together quite a lot of partners from Senegal, Burkina Faso, South Africa, and Japan, including JIRCAS and the University of Tokyo. And I'm going to show two case studies that we did. In the first one, we try to understand, is there heterogeneity in these systems? Because we bundled them together, there are assumptions that all NUS production systems are the same. They might be small scale, self-consumption, underutilized, underdeveloped value chains, but is there heterogeneity? So we went to south and southwest part of Burkina Faso with our partners in Burkina Faso, and we did interviews in areas that practically every household either cultivated some NUS or collected some NUS from the wild or both. And through different statistical tools, we try to understand, is there heterogeneity in these production systems, or are we talking basically about the same production system? What we found is that, of course, they adopt all sorts of different NUS, in some cases in conjunction with conventional crops like maize. But what is very interesting to see is that a lot of the collection or the cultivation is happening in months that are not climatically stressed. So a lot of the discussion is that, okay, NUS are an amazing option in times of the year of low food security when the climate is harsh. But in reality, a lot of these NUS are being collected throughout the year. are being produced throughout the year. Of course, there are some that can be an important livelihood buffer during periods of food insecurity, but maybe a myth that we need to dispel about a lot of these crops is that they are only being used during time of climate extremes. In reality, no, you can find them, a lot of them being cultivated or collected throughout the year. Another interesting thing is that there are radically different perceptions when it comes to the nutritional status, the importance of the livelihoods. So I'm not going to go through all these results, okay? But what is important to see is that there is high variability in how the local producers and consumers are viewing these crops. They're not viewing them the same way. Some crops might be particularly important food source source of food year-round, like fonio, or they can be only in some parts of the year, like taro and suchet. So we're talking about particularly very different perceptions and uses about these crops. And what we did is, we did the clustering analysis and we identified three very discrete groups of producers. You have those that were cultivating NUS for sales. They were much more market-oriented. They were selling most of the NUS harvest for sale, consuming just a little bit of it. And NUS was a very important source of household livelihoods. You had other households that were specializing from collecting from the wild for sales. So 96% of their NUS was going to sales and very little for own self-consumption. And it was considered important for the livelihood strategies. And you had around a half of the sample that they mainly consuming most of it. They were not selling it. So what we're seeing, even in an area, in a very small geographic area, that you're having a subset of crops, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 crops, what you see is that you have a totally radically different engagement with them. And this is very important to consider because if you are reading the literature about neglected and underutilized crops, they're coming bundled together. And this is good because it raises a lot of awareness on this type of crops. But in reality, we're talking about radically different production models with very different livelihood strategies of the households. What we found very important is high level of sales. We thought that the local value chains are going to be underperforming. But we see that a lot of households are actually selling a lot of these products locally, and they're leveraging money that I'm going to show later how they're being used. Importantly, these groups have also different socioeconomic performance. So we did propensity score matching analysis, and we found that, generally speaking, there are differences between some of the groups in their socioeconomic performance, food security status, livelihood status. So when we're talking about households engaging with neglected and underutilized crops, we have to keep in mind that even in these small geographical areas, there might be very, very big variability. What does it mean, this thing? Maybe we need totally different approaches when we try to promote certain NUS or strengthen value chains, because maybe we're not talking about exactly the same livelihood strategies. For our second study in Burkina Faso, in Senegal, sorry, we try to answer a little bit different question. To what extent does NUS adoption diversify farming livelihoods, and how does it mediate poverty alleviation and food security? So we try to look at the impacts now, not the characteristics of the households, but how does this impact happens? Again, we went and we did several hundred interviews with households that cultivate NUS, collect NUS, or both. What we saw here is that, again, there are multiple types of NUS, and what is very important, our network analysis showed that a lot of the households adopt more than one. Maybe they adopt some of them part of the year, or they collect some of them part of the year, and part of the year they collect others, which means that we're talking about a broader portfolio, a broader contribution in their livelihoods. We did structural equation modeling. It looks a little bit arcane what I'm going to be showing here, but what is important to see is that NUS, like NUS adoption, is generally associated positively with crop diversification, which increases usually the harvest or the amount of food produced in the household, but it does not seem to have a positive effect on food security. The positive effect of food security is coming from the income generation that is allowing them to purchase other food that is reducing their food security and their deprivation. That was very surprising to us, that we thought, okay, these households are consuming NUS, diversification is increasing their harvest, and through this self-consumption pathway, we're going to see the positive effect on livelihoods. In reality, the positive effect on their livelihoods is coming from the income generation, which again shows very clearly that we might need to strengthen these value chains, to formalize them, to strengthen them, because they might have this positive effect on income that might reduce their deprivation or their months of food insecurity. Coming back, some of the very basic messages that I want to communicate is that NUS have very diverse uses and cater to different beneficiaries with different needs and perceptions at different times of the year. It is good to create such umbrella terms, but when we have to see them locally, it might be more important to understand the local conception differences, the differentiated ways that they contribute to the livelihoods. Some NUS are valuable additions to local and regional diets. They have very favorable nutritional properties. Our colleagues in South Africa and University of Pretoria did nutritional analysis of several of these NUS, and they found very positive nutritional properties. They can be harvested during food insecurity periods of the year, and some of them are very well adapted to local climates and can provide income, which can have all sorts of positive effects in household livelihoods. However, many of these value chains, and we saw it locally, are very underdeveloped, uncoordinated, and localized. So we need all sorts of different actions that we might be discussed later on in the panel in order to at least upscale these crops locally in the African context. One of the very interesting things that we saw is that there is general reluctance to adopt many of these crops in urban diets because they are being considered having a stigma as crops for the poor. Poor people are, or food insecure people are consuming these crops when they're in need. So maybe a very big starting point is to start creating locally, for local consumers in urban centers of Africa, much better awareness about this kind of crops. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention. What I presented is a much bigger work, even though I presented with a lot of institutions over many years. And I would like also to thank our funders, maybe they're around, the Japan Science and Technology Agency, for giving us this opportunity for this really international project. Thank you very much.
ガスパラトス先生、ありがとうございました。アフリカの特徴の一つが多様性なのかなと思いますけれども、そこでいろいろな今日お話しいただいた作物の可能性というものがあるのかなと感じました。次は国際農研生物資源利用領域主任研究員の伊関幸太郎が講演いたします。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
Good afternoon, everyone. Here I introduce some achievements from our long research collaboration with Burkina Faso, which is located in the central region of West Africa. Maybe I don't need to explain again, the West Africa is one of the regions facing the risk of food and climate change. So today I had one impressive word from Dr. Fowler. He said, soil nourishes the crops, and crops have to nourish the soil. Crop have to nourish the soil is very difficult in West Africa actually, but as the first step, we have to understand the relationship between the soil and the crops. So our research focuses on the soils. As everyone knows, the soil is the most crucial factor in the food production. So when I visit the farmers field in West Africa, every time I ask to farmers, do you notice the difference of soils? Almost the farmers say no. They don't care the soil in their crop production. Some farmers say yes. They understand that there are different soil types, but they still don't know how to address to the different soils in their cultivation. So our goal is to the advisory system for farmers to know the best choice of crops or varieties and even the farming practices depending on the soil types. So our research primarily focused on the cowpea as a major legume crop in West Africa. Africa accounts for 90% of global cowpea productions, and in locally, cowpea contributes 14% of protein sources and 30% of folic acid sources in the people's diet. However, the cowpea production in West Africa is very variable year to year, and we found the soil is the cause of this yield instability. Let's start to talk about the soil distribution in West Africa. The left map shows the major cowpea production area, where almost the area is overlapping with the Sudan savanna climate zones, where the two major soil types are widely distributed, that are leakish soils and prince soils. Hereafter, we call as LX soil and PX soil. In locally, both soils are located closely each other according to the distance from river bottom. LX soil locates in the lower place of the rolling hill near the river, and PX soil exists in the upper side. The distance between these soils is less than 1 kilometer. The most difference of the soils is the rooting depth. LX have deeper soil layer, rooting layer than PX. Both soils are very poor in fertility, and the PX soil is generally lower, more infertile than LX, and the grain yield is generally lower in PX. In addition, there are large interannual yield variations, and the effect of environment on grain yield differs year by year, even in the same soil type. So as a cause of this complicated effect of soil, we focused on the soil water characteristics. The upper figure shows the 4 years rainfall variation during the cowpea growing season as the central part of Burkina Faso. The middle figure shows the available soil water content, and the PX frequently reaches to 0. That means no available soil water for cowpea, especially in the year of small rainfall. This is because of the poor water holding capacity of PX soil. On the other hand, the bottom figure shows the soil air volume, and the LX soil frequently reaches below 20%, especially in the year of high rainfall. That low value of soil air volume causes the root anoxia, depressing the plant growth. So this means the PX soil prone to drought stress. So this can be confirmed in the plant side by evaluating the stomatal conductance. That means the availability of soil water by the plant. So if this value is decreases, that means the occurrence of a drought stress. So the stomatal conductance is generally lower in PX soil than LX throughout the growth period. That means the occurrence of drought stress in PX soil. On the other hand, LX soil is prone to excess moisture stress because of its characteristics of high water holding capacity. In other words, poor drainage. So the effect can be seen in the number of nodules. Nodule is conferring the symbiotic nitrogen fixations, and the plant from LX soil is has lower number of nodules. And also the nodules from LX soil do not have the activity. So the cross section of the nodules color is brown, while the active one has red color. The excess moisture stress also depressing the effect of farming practices, such kind of high plant density and fertilizer. The yield increases due to this treatment is always lower in LX soil. So in the summary of the first sections, the difference in soil water characteristics is the cause of yield instability. So the climate risk on cowpea production differs in the plants, differs in the soil types in the Sudan savanna. So we have to address not only the drought stress, but also the excess moisture stress at the same time. The occurrence of excessive rainfall is expected to increase in the next 30 years, according to the latest climate projection from CMIP6. The amount of total rainfall and the number of days of hard rain during the cowpea growing season will rise in the Sudan savanna. So this figure shows the predicted yield responses to the seasonal rainfall in the LX soil and PX soil. The yield prediction has been performed not only for cowpea, but for other major crops in Sudan savanna that are millet, maize, sorghum, groundnuts, and soybean. And so compared to other crops, cowpea shows better relative yield in the area of small rainfall. That means the cowpea has high yield stability under the dry conditions. However, the yield increase with the increase of seasonal rainfall becomes slowing down in the ranges over the 600 millimeters of seasonal rainfall, especially in the LX soil. This means the cowpea is more sensitive to the excess rainfall in the LX soil. So in the last part, we explored the cowpea genetic resources for excess moisture stress tolerance and also drought stress tolerance. The genetic resources, of course, provided from the Genetic Resources Center. But we did not just focus on the cultivated varieties, but also include the wild cowpea ancestors, since they have great potential to inhabit in the diverse soil water conditions from dry to wet environment of their origins. Because the drought and excess moisture stress is quite the opposite. So at the beginning, I expect that there would be a trade-off relationship between the tolerances. And in the result, as I expected, almost the accessions have a tolerance, one of the tolerance or none of them. However, some accessions, almost of them are from wild ancestors, have tolerance to both drought and excess moisture stresses. We found that these unique dual tolerance wild accessions drastically change their root morphology depending on the soil water conditions. So these wild accessions are potential genetic resources for future cowpea breeding to improve the adaptability to diverse water conditions and also to improve the resilience in the future climate change. So this is the last slide to show the future perspectives. Now we are addressing to develop the high-resolution soil map in which the soil type of the given site can be predicted through machine learning using the satellite data and runoff model as the input. Then the future yield performance of each soil type is calculated from crop model and climate projections, and depending on this yield projection of each site, the best choice of crop or variety can be advised for each farmer of each site. So now I'm thinking to install this system into the user-friendly smartphone application, easy to use for all the stakeholders. So this is just a prototype, now only addressing the crop choice, but in the future, the farming practices, such kind of fertilizer, plant density, and sowing date also will be integrated in this system. So this system will advise your crop choice and farming practices for climate change. Thank you for your attention.
関さん、ありがとうございました。カウピー、日本語で捧げは、日本ではそれほど馴染みがないかもしれないですけれども、この地域では非常に重要な作物ですね。これからの研究も楽しみです。はい、続きまして、国際農研生産環境畜産領域プロジェクトリーダー、テラアフリカプロジェクト代表の中村聡より講演いたします。よろしくお願いいたします。
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to Dr. Fowler for coming to Japan and for giving us the impressive presentation. Thank you very much. Today, I'd like to talk about a healthy soil for adapted crops by introducing our activity in Africa. And I want to mention about the necessity of interdisciplinary research collaboration. We are targeting to the savanna zone in Africa. Africa savanna is considered as a zone of high agricultural potential. FAO declared this zone as Africa's sleeping giant in 2009 for several reasons, such as vast exploited land, relatively suitable soil climate conditions for cropping, and also rapid expansion of the market in these regions. On the other hand, we also need to care about several issues, including the environmental impacts of the expansion of cultivated land, soil degradation, and extreme weather conditions. That's why we think it is essential to develop and disseminate sustainable and stable crop production technology for farmers. We all know that climate change is a current worldwide issue, but how does it impact Africa and its cropping system? Although Africa contributes less to greenhouse gas emissions, the impact of the climate change in the continent is severe. The rising in temperature increases health risk, which declines the labor productivity with negative economic impact. It also raises the sea levels, increase the flooding in coastal area. The changes in climate cycles increase the frequency of extreme weather events and the cascade of the effect, such as increasing rainfall, is increasing frequency of the floods, and it causes the soil loss, and so on. Therefore, it is urgent to establish crop production systems that can minimize the impact of the climate change in Africa. In this sense, we have initiated the project last year focusing on soil health in Africa, with a strong collaboration with Sasagawa Africa Association and under the financial support of Nippon Foundation. The project title is Technology Establishment for Regional Adapted Regenerative Agriculture in Africa. We are calling this project TERRA. Here, I'd like to give you the background of the project by introducing the common challenge and the direction of expected changes. It is well known that African farmers are struggling with low crop productivity due to low soil fertility. So soil health enhancement against the further degradation will be needed. And crop production in the regions is unstable due to unstable rainfall. This calls for necessity to establish resilient agriculture for climate change impact. Farmers can use limited option of crops and agricultural techniques. So technology development is expected to deal with soaring demand and changing food needs. Human resources are important to sustain agricultural productions. Therefore, capacity buildings, especially for new technology, will be highly required. To improve soil health, it is first important to understand what it is about. USDA defines soil health as the continued capacity of a soil to function as a vital living ecosystems that sustains plants, animals, and humans. Essential soil functions are listed here. Regulating water. Soil helps control water dynamics. Water flows over the land or into and through the soil. Sustaining plant and animal life. The diversity and productivity of living things is depending on soil. Filtering and buffering potential pollutants. The minerals and microbes in soil are responsible for filtering, buffering, decomposing, and immobilizing of the pollutants. the cycling nutrient, the carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and the other nutrients are stored and cycled in the soil. Providing physical stability and support. Soil structure provides a medium for plant roots. Soils also provide support for human structures. Soil health research has determined how to manage soil in a way that improves soil function. Here are 4 principles to manage soil for health. 1 is a minimize disturbance. 1 is maximize biodiversity. And 1, maximize soil cover. And another one is maximize living roots. This slide shows the overall logic model of Terra Africa. As introduced in the background, we are expecting to develop technical options, including soil management, cropping system, dissemination, and so on. The developed technology will be integrated as a package according to the technology acceptance condition in target area. Through these activities, we will conduct technology transfer of regenerative agriculture technology packages for Africa. We are calling these packages as AFRA, African type of regenerative agriculture. Our vision of the project are enhanced soil health and technology transfer. To achieve a truly sustainable food security, we developed sustainable technology for soil health based on scientific knowledge and conduct technology transfer for their disseminations. We hope our activity can contribute to the promotion of this regenerative agricultural technology adapted to Africa. This slide shows the activity that we are conducting in Ghana. We are performing the 6 subjects on technology development for soil health enhancement and 3 subjects on technology development for dissemination. As a technology development for soil health enhancement, we evaluate the impact of the minimum tillage, We evaluate the impact of the tillage method, especially focusing on the minimum tillage in the savanna. And second, the leguminous crops cultivation are assumed to positively affect to soil biodiversity. And the third issue, we are evaluating the impact of the irrigation on soil carbon and biological properties. And the 4th options, livestock in Africa can be considered as an important source of organic resources that can contribute to soil health. That's why we are doing the development of the livestock feed management to contribute to soil health. And the 5th issue concerns the application of transformed low-grade phosphate rock by calcination with other unused organic resources on soil carbon and biological properties. At last, we developed technology for mushroom cultivation and evaluate mushroom waste on crop yield and soil health, because we know that the mushroom waste can contribute to the improvement of the soil biodiversity. And as technical component for the disseminations, we are developing a soil diagnostic method, including soil microbial diversity assessment. And the second activity for dissemination, we are considering that procedure of optimization of farming operations when applying AFRA technology. We are also doing the elucidation of the technology selection factors. From these activities, we will make adaptive integrated packages and do dissemination for African countries under the collaboration with Sasagawa Africa Association. As you can see in this slide, our activity for soil health enhancement are centered on the field of soil science and cultivation management method. To achieve soil health enhancement in Africa, we think that crop or variety selection on this issue will be needed. But now our project is relatively weak. This trend is evident not only our project Terra Africa, but also in other international projects of soil health enhancement, except VACS. It is probably due to the difficulty of soil health evaluations. However, the trials focusing on the selection of crops and varieties that contribute to improving soil health are critically important. This is one example showing the selection of crops and related interactions. Crops with extensive root architecture provide significant positive options, as the roots can improve soil structure and stability, and improve the uptake of water and nutrients, and sequester more carbon. The associated root X states can select microbial community and promote microbial activity and nutrient mobilization. The intense root system is expected to be positive against the drought by helping to access water in deeper soil layer or to act as water storage. We think that the selection of crops, varieties, and their interactions with soil is crucial for improving soil health and sustainability. I wish the time we had more time to go in detail for some result obtained so far, but I will end the presentation by these following take-home message. The message enhancing soil health will be the key for establishing a sustainable and resilient agricultural system in Africa. And the technologies for enhancing soil health in Africa may not be the same as those in developed countries, as soil conditions and environmental factors differ. Crop science will be essential for enhancing soil health. And to promote cultivation methods that enhance soil health and improve yields in Africa, cooperation among various countries, including developed nations, is essential. That is my last slide. Thank you very much.
中村さん、ありがとうございました。ソイルヘルス、土、土壌の健康、それからテラアフリカのプロジェクトの紹介もしていただきました。連携という意味で非常に意のあるプロジェクトだと思います。それではセッション3に移らせていただきます。セッション3ではパネルセッションおよび Q&A としまして、ファウラー博士との意見交換を行います。少々準備にお時間をいただきます。舞台転換が完了するまでしばらくお待ちください。